Hey, Ken Johnson here with Great Wave Communications, and we're continuing our series of interviewing different folks with a connection to Conneaut or Ashtabula County who've gone on and done amazing things and really become leaders in their field, kind of inspire the rest of us to think big, and especially for our young people that are still in school. And the privilege a couple years ago of meeting Mr. Ray Fogg, and today we're up in Cleveland and have the honor to meet with Mr. Fogg and get a chance to get a feel for his connection to Northeast Ohio and specifically the Conneaut area. We're sitting here looking at the sign for Fogg Builders, but from what I've heard, that wasn't your first entrepreneurial exercise. I think you had a big start in a newspaper route. Can you tell us about that?
We were in a suburb of Detroit, and I started buying newspaper routes, and I ended up with about 4,000 papers to deliver every day.
Wow.
And of course, I had to hire my classmates to help me get these papers delivered. And I also remember a subsidiary business I got into, which was used bikes, because so many of my fellow classmates didn't have bikes, so I got in these.
So you'd rent them the bikes so that they could deliver papers for you.
Papers for me. Some of them I just had to give them the bikes, but nevertheless, they delivered papers for me. And then I remember that I thought that one of my major problems was collecting. So I hired my sixth grade math teacher to teach me how to do a billing system.
Yeah.
And she came up with a very good system, which was with their Friday paper. I had clipped on the Friday paper an envelope with the marking on it of how much they owed me, and all they had to do was put a check in it and mail it to me. So that was her system that she set up. But I realized that one of my other problems was collecting my overdue account.
Right.
Now, I don't think I thought of it that way back then, but who is going to give a hard time to a sixth grade girl who comes in? So I hired all the girls in my class to collect my overdue accounts. But I'm sure I didn't think of it that way back then.
Well, but it probably worked.
It did work.
That's pretty creative. Well, I know that I've heard that you went to high school in Conneaut at
Yes.
Rao High School.
Yes.
But I think there was something crazy there where you might have been on your own quite a bit. How did that play out?
Well, because we moved so much, my older siblings wanted to be sure that I got to go 4 years in a row to the same high school.
Sure.
Which none of them had. So they wanted me to do that and got my parents to promise that when I become high school age, I would get to know to the same school for 4 years in a row. Came that we were, I think, in Detroit at the time, and I parents came to me and said, well, okay, you're ready to go to high school. Where do you want to go? And I said, I think that I will go to our summer house in Conneaut and winterize it and live there. So I lived there the 4 years almost entirely by myself, but although looking back on it, saying entirely by myself, it's a little bit exaggeration, because mother did come up once in a while, and sisters came up once in a while, and brother came up once in a while. But I was there most of the time by myself.
As a different era, huh?
Yeah, wouldn't allow that today, would they?
Probably not. What do you remember as a younger person in the downtown Conneaut area? Because it's drastically different back in your era than what it is today.
I did a recollection of 1935 going into downtown Conneaut and during the summer while we were there. And I remember specifically how hot the sidewalks were for my bare feet. I would go into town and then running across the sidewalks to get either in the store or underneath some kind of an awning. So I remember that very much. But what I think the biggest item I remember is how important Saturday night was for Conneaut during that period of time. nicknamed it the Farmers' Night because most of the farmers came in on Saturday night, but there were also all kinds of vendors who set up on the sidewalks with selling in front of the stores and et cetera. So it was a big night and a lot going on in Conneaut on Saturday night.
Really? Wow. I think you mentioned that you weren't the only member of your family to attend high school in Conneaut.
Yeah.
Which of your other siblings?
Well,
and how
they
long?
ended up, actually all of them graduated from there. Both
Really?
of my sisters graduated from Rao High School. Sister Alice even graduated from there, and then they allowed her to come back and take some secretarial studies even after she graduated, which I thought was great. The brother Frank was quite a basketball player, and he was pretty much a star in basketball at Rao, and was at the time that they went into almost a state champion. They didn't quite
Really?
make it, but
Wow.
they went very far. So they all attended Rao High School. And as I mentioning to you, just before that, I saw that I was still in 8th grade.
Right.
And looked and saw, heaven's sakes, here's this young Ray Fogg in playing basketball in the 8th grade team, which surprised me as I looked at that, and I showed you that a minute ago.
And you were in the same grade, I think, as longtime Conneaut native Dwayne Punker.
Yeah.
When did you guys meet? And
Well, we apparently met while I was in 8th grade somehow. He made a connection with me because he asked me to come over to Rao and play on their basketball team. So I met him then, and we were friends even through all of high school years, friends, and we had other friends with us. And also, he did end up going to Ohio University, and the reason I ended up at Ohio University is Dwayne asked me if I could drive him down because he didn't have transportation, he didn't own a car, and I did at that time. And he asked me if I would drive him down, and I drove him to OU and looked around and thought, gee, this is a pretty good place. I think I'll stay and go to school.
and you and Dwayne stayed friends over the years until really he passed away here,
Yes.
about a year ago?
Yes. We stayed in contact, and really, you got to remember our classes were pretty small.
Right.
The whole class was in the 30s or 40 people, and so we have been closer friends than you'd think as a whole class. And,
Yeah.
and we got together a number of times.
So you mentioned you ended up at OU because of Dwayne and kind of a casual nature. What did you end up studying while you were there?
I studied civil engineering, which is what was part of my plan of what I was going to do, which was what my father was.
Sure.
He was a civil engineer, and I wanted to then go on into the construction business. So I went to OU as a civil engineer, but I look back and I wonder how I also knew to do some other things while I was there. I went over to the School of Business and took several courses over in the School of Business. And I remember particularly going to the, wasn't called that, called the speech school at that time, not the communication school, but I went there. And I remember specifically a professor who taught that you do extemporaneous speaking. And I remember you would walk into class and he would hand you a piece of paper and he'd say, 5 minutes on women's hats, Mr. Fogg. And you had to walk up to the front of the class and talk about women's hats. Great experience in understanding what life is really like, is that you don't get a long preparation for the answering things, and you have to be prepared to talk about something or answer something that somebody asks a question.